Before you pass judgment, allow me to explain how I got here on my 62nd birthday. I assumed I was going out to lunch. I dressed my finest sweater and even styled my hair. But instead of cake and joy, I was given a suitcase and abandoned. That was only the beginning. If you think betrayal only comes from strangers, wait until it takes your surname. Stay tuned till the conclusion and tell me in the comments where you're viewing from. They believe a mother's love is unconditional. It is patient, forgiving, and forever. I believe it. I experienced it firsthand. Every scraped knee, every sleepless night, every school play, I was there for Brandon, my only son. On my birthday, I awoke with a flutter in my chest. That usual pleasant feeling of expectation. 62. I am alone in my small house in Dayton, Ohio. But I am hopeful. Brandon hadn't phoned much recently, saying work was demanding and things with his wife were strained, but he'd definitely show up today. I made pancakes, which are his favorite, and put 2 plates. At midday, I was still alone. My heart sank slightly. But I refused to spiral. I checked my phone a dozen times and reread old texts, hoping to feel connected. The doorbell rang around p.m. I opened it to see Brandon standing there with that childish grin he used to give when he wanted something. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, clutching a little grocery store bouquet. I grinned despite the sting in my chest and hugged him tightly. "Did you come?" "Of course," he responded, patting my back firmly. "Get dressed." I made a lunch reservation. I did not even question it. I grabbed my coat, a small pocketbook, and slipped into the shoes that usually pinched my toes, but looked good. I felt excited, like a girl going to prom, but we didn't drive to the city or a restaurant. We drove into a location with a long driveway surrounded with maple trees whose leaves had gone ash gold and red. When I gazed up at the sign, my gut twisted. Willow Pines Senior Living Facility. "Brandon, what's this?" He cleared his throat. "Mom, we need to chat. This isn't safe anymore. You live alone and get memory lapses." "What are the types of memory lapses?" I snapped. He continued chatting. "I found a fantastic site. It's safe and comfy. You'll meet people your own age and participate in activities." I laughed, a bitter laugh that didn't feel like laughter at all. "You are kidding. You brought me here. On my birthday." He got out of the automobile. "Let's go in." I refused to move. This is when he opened the trunk. My suitcase was already packed. I stared at it. "Frozen. You went through my belongings," he exhaled. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." Inside, it seemed as if time had frozen. Smiling faces at reception. The odor of antiseptic and overdone veggies. He handed over the documents, legal papers. "A transfer of power of attorney. This is my name." His signature. Done. I did not cry then. Not yet. I let them lead me into a room with beige walls, an adjustable bed with a small window overlooking a brick wall. My birthday. Gift. I sat on the side of the bed, still wearing my coat, and felt the cold penetrate through my bones. No cake. No candles. Just silence. Hours have passed. I eventually unwrapped the bouquet. It had wilted during the car ride. The flowers reflected how I felt. That night, I lay awake, listening to the soft rustle of nurses and the faint sound of a television somewhere down the corridor. The mattress was overly firm. The bedding smelled of bleach. I went over every interaction I'd had with Brandon over the last year, looking for clues I hadn't noticed. I recalled all the times I said yes when I should have said no. I covered for him, loaned him money, and made explanations for others. I swallowed my disappointment because I loved him, but that night, I stopped protecting him. Something broke inside me. Something crucial. The following morning, I asked a nurse for my cell phone. She stated my son had taken care of it, turned off the line, and said it was too complex for me. It was then that I knew I was not here to be cared for. I came here to be erased, and if I don't find a way out, they will triumph. But I'm not as delicate as they believe, not even close. I didn't eat for 2 days. Not because I wanted to make a point, but because I couldn't handle the food or the truth. Something about being regarded as if you're no longer useful fractures a part of you that never entirely heals. I had raised a child, built a house, and loved deeply, and now all I had was a room number and a patient chart. Most of the nurses were kind. When you're confined, however, kindness can feel like pity. They addressed me as Sweetie and Han, as if I were 10 or 100. Nobody asked what I did previously. No one asked what I enjoyed. To them, I was simply another elderly woman in slippers who forgot things, even if I had not forgotten anything. Doris, my roommate, slept all day and snored at night. She didn't say much. But when she did, she mentioned people who hadn't seen her in years. I listened because I knew the pain of absence too well. I tried to keep my mind alert. I watched the news in the common area and completed the crossword puzzles they had left in the corridor. I reread a novel that I'd read twice before. But something within me was sinking, deeper, darker. Then, on day 4, I met Ruby. She was not meant to work that day. A nurse called in sick. And Ruby, a young woman with braids tucked up under her scrub cap and kindness in her eyes, stepped in. She was examining my vitals when she said, "You do not belong here." I gazed at her, startled. She smiled. "Do not get me wrong. It's understandable that many people require assistance. But you don't appear lost." I blinked away the unexpected sting in my eyes. We got to talking. She inquired about Brandon. I told her everything I could without coming apart. She listened. Not simply nodding, really listened. Later that day, she returned with something in her hand. She muttered, "This belonged to Mr. Henley, a resident who died last week. We discovered it nestled within a Bible. Nobody claimed it. It was a lottery ticket, folded, somewhat yellowed, and dated 2 weeks earlier." I chuckled. "Dry and brittle. And you want me to test my luck?" She winked. "Hello? The world owes you something. I hadn't planned to do it. Not at first. It felt stupid, but boredom and desperation make weird bedfellows. That night, I waited for the corridor to be quiet before typing the numbers into one of the facility's antiquated desktop computers in the lounge. My hand froze. My eyes scanned the paper repeatedly. Is millions? I covered my lips with both hands. I looked around. No one was present. The hush that ensued was deafening. It wasn't joy that I felt. Not at all. It was terror. Pure, electrifying fear. If Brandon finds out, if someone discovered out, I printed the confirmation, folded it little, and placed it into my bra. The next day, I called Ruby aside. "I need to speak to someone, privately." "Someone legal." She did not inquire why. She simply nodded. Ruby knew somebody. A volunteer attorney came by twice a month to assist elderly with wills and other documents. I waited, pulse hammering, until he arrived on Friday. His name was Aaron, young, intelligent. More importantly, discreet. We sat in the small break room. I slipped him the lottery confirmation and asked, "Can you help me disappear?" His eyebrows lifted, but he did not flinch. "We'll need to move quickly," he explained. The following hours were a haze. Paperwork, notarizations, financial transfers, a new phone, a temporary postal address. He called an independent financial expert who established a blind trust. My name was not displayed. Brandon would never receive a penny. I signed a new will that leaves everything to charity, but it has not yet been disclosed. Brandon had already signed my life away once. I would not let him do it again. Ruby hugged me the night I left. She said, "Don't forget us when you're free." I did not cry. I could not. I slipped away just before daybreak. Dressed in borrowed clothing and carrying a duffel bag containing only the essentials, they assumed I was senile, broken, alone, but I was about to become a ghost with $1 million. Let them look for me. They wouldn't notice me coming. The bus travel from Ohio was lengthy, quiet, and cold. I sat in the back, hood up, sunglasses on, clutching the bag as if it held my soul. In many respects, it did. I wasn't sure where I was headed. All I knew was that I needed to get far enough away that no one could locate me. Not Brandon, not his wife, not the lawyers he'd probably already contacted. Aaron assisted me in purchasing a modest house in rural Tennessee using a new trust name, something off-grid but livable. There are no cameras. No neighbors are too close, just enough space between myself and the world I was leaving behind. When we reached the Kentucky border, I breathed for the first time in hours. Freedom had a flavor, and it was not sweet. It was metallic, resembling blood and fear. The house was not fancy. A one-story brick building with chipping paint and a misaligned mailbox. However, it had a functioning heater, clean water. Most significantly, silence, not the kind you get in a nursing home, where people have given up. This was the kind of silence that allows you to breathe. For the following 3 days, I lived like a shadow. I cooked modest meals, went to the mailbox, and sat on the porch, wrapped in an old quilt, watching the wind blow dead leaves across the yard. I avidly followed the news. I half expected to see my name in bold letters. Missing woman receives $1 million. Son alleges mental instability. But there was nothing. Not yet. I stored the lotto ticket in a fireproof box beneath the floorboard in the hallway closet. It comes with the new will, a burner phone, and a note addressed to whoever discovers it, just in case. The silence was broken one morning, almost a week after I had left Willow Pines. A knock on the door. I froze. I hadn't told anyone where I was. I didn't even have a credit card under my name. My heart pounded like a war drum in my chest. I crept up to the window and took a peek. Just a delivery man. Groceries. Aaron had put up this arrangement. I still couldn't shake the feeling. That afternoon, curiosity got the best of me. I made a phony Facebook page and searched for Brandon. He was smiling on his profile picture, as if the world hadn't fallen apart. In his most recent post, he stated, "If anyone has seen my mother, Margaret Taylor, please contact me or the Dayton police. She has been absent for several days. We're concerned about her safety." Hundreds of comments appeared beneath it. Prayers, condolences. People are applauding Brandon for being such a terrific son. I laughed so hard that I cried. They had no idea. None. What genuinely broke me was not the post. It was the photograph he used. It was not recent. It was dated 5 years ago, one of the last birthdays we shared together. I was wearing a sparkly party hat, and he had his arm around me. We seemed delighted. How simple it is to portray love in photos. That night, I was unable to sleep. I sat in the living room and stared at the fireplace. My thoughts spun in circles. And the longer I sat with them, the darker they got. I remembered every time I had handed Brandon money. Every loan, every lie. I remembered how he gaslighted me. Subtly, but sufficient. He'd say things like, "You told me that already," even though I hadn't. Or perhaps you are forgetting more and more these days. I assumed I was aging terribly. I assumed it was my fault. It was not. He wanted me to mistrust myself. So when he took over my life, I couldn't resist. I was done being dominated. The following morning, I called Aaron using a burner number. I said, "I need you to update my will again." He did not inquire why. What changes I want to make this extremely clear. Brandon Taylor receives nothing, not $1. Not a keepsake, not a recollection. Done, he said. "You're safe now, Margaret." But I was not yet. Because Deep inside, I knew something was coming, and I needed to be prepared for it. It began with a letter. Plain envelope. There's no return address, tucked between utility bills and garbage mail. Without the paper, I would not have noticed it. Heavier than normal. Expensive. My stomach churned the moment I touched it. Inside was a single sheet, a copy. My signature. Alternatively, it appeared to be, there are two more below that. One from my late husband, Richard, and the other from Brandon. It was a loan document dated 12 years ago, a double dollar. Personal loans were taken out in both Richard's and my names. The bank's logo was real, so was the notary stamps. But I had never signed that form, never. I sat down on the ancient sofa. The letter was trembling in my palms. The document was in my handwriting, down to the loop in Margaret's G. But something about it seemed odd, too clean, too practiced. My husband would never have concealed a debt like that. And Brandon, he never spoke a word. I took out the fireproof box. I retrieved the earlier file folder that Aaron had helped me construct. A collection of old financial paperwork that we saved before I departed. Inside, I discovered 3 other kinds. All have my falsified signature. A chilling revelation passed through me. Brandon had been stealing from me and Richard for several years. It explained the weird tension in our last years together. Richard ignored certain financial subjects. How did we suddenly have less? Brandon always appeared to need money in an emergency. But I drove a newer automobile every year. I assumed the quiet disputes at night were work-related. The canceled vacation plans, bad investments. I blamed it on aging, the marketplace, a broad stroke of luck. But it was Brandon. I did not cry at any point. Not this time. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging deeper. Over the next 3 days, I pieced everything together. Brandon had fabricated multiple loan documents using both Richard's and my Social Security numbers. The quantities vary, doll here, doll there. Some were paid off. Others had been quietly moved into debt collection. Richard must have covered the majority of it before his death, taking the disgrace with him. However, one account that was still operational showed a rapidly increasing balance of overdimes, and it had defaulted in my name only 3 months before I was dropped at Willow Pines. I sat in the darkness of that small Tennessee living room. My screen is flashing in front of me. My hands tightened so tightly that my knuckles ached. This was not simply betrayal. This was theft, fraud. Criminal. I contacted Aaron again. I have new information. I told him. Forged paperwork, loans. Brandon did it. I believe you, he replied gently. Would you like to press charges? Not yet. I wasn't prepared. Not because I had reservations. No, those were gone. I was not prepared because I wanted him to feel the terror first, the silence, not knowing. I wanted him to wonder if I knew, because the truth was, I was no longer concealing, I was hunting. I collected every document I could. Every account is linked to my name, every old email, every financial notice Brandon ever sent on my behalf. I even called the former bank we used and sought documents under a legal pretext that Aaron assisted me with. The puzzle gradually came together. And what it revealed made my blood turn cold. Brandon had taken out a high-interest loan against the small business that I co-founded with Richard in the 1980s. During those early years, we operated a catering business out of our garage. He used the LLC, which is still technically active, to obtain a doubler's line of credit. He signed it with Richard's name, 2 years after Richard's death. That wasn't simply a moral failing. That constituted federal fraud. I saved everything in an encrypted folder, backed it up, and printed a copy to keep in the box under the floorboards. I was unsure how long I had, because if Brandon was as desperate as I suspected, and he had even the slightest suspicion that I had vanished with millions, he'd come after me, soon. Have you ever looked at someone you've loved all your life and realized you never really knew them? That is what it felt like. scrolling through pages of documents that linked my son to a long and tangled web of deceit made my stomach turn. The man I once rocked to sleep in my arms had become a stranger. Not just any stranger, a dangerous one. By now, I'd confirmed everything. Brandon forged my signature, lied to the banks, manipulated my late husband into covering for him. Worst of all, he had done everything while pretending to be a devoted son, but the darkest truth emerged from a simple search. I discovered it, buried in a public database, thanks to Aaron's access. Brandon Taylor, currently under federal investigation for fraudulent tax returns, embezzlement, and identity fraud. Misuse of identities. That one hit the hardest. I clicked on the case file, trembling. The details were mostly redacted, but the accusations were unambiguous. Brandon had been creating false identities, inflationary incomes, falsifying deductions, and submitting returns in order to profit from refunds. Some of those identities were deceased. Some were elderly, some were real people, including me. The IRS had flagged several returns filed in my name over the past 3 years. I had no idea. I stared at the screen. My mind in a spiral. Had he planned to take my money from the beginning? Was this the reason he was so quick to shove me into a facility and shut down my phone? It wasn't concern. It was containment. He wanted to keep me silent, disoriented, and out of the way. I pushed back from the desk, pacing the narrow living room, one hand on my chest, to quiet the tremors. My own son had weaponized my identity, used my name as a tool for his schemes, and when the heat came down, he'd planned to put me away like a loose end in a messy story. Only now, I wasn't just a loose end. I was the one holding the thread. I didn't call the police, not yet. Instead, I started documenting everything, every lie, every loan, every forged line on a piece of paper. I printed them, filed them in manila folders, labeled them with dates. I began recording audio notes, not because I was frightened of forgetting, but because I wanted my voice to be the last one in the room if something happened to me. Then, I made a choice. I forwarded a copy of the full file anonymously to the Department of Justice, not to make a statement. Not yet, but to sow a seed. They'd have the evidence. If something ever happened to me, they'd know where to look. Still, I couldn't stop the sensation that he knew. I started noticed automobiles parked longer than normal near the house. Once, a man knocked on the door claiming he was undertaking a survey of the neighborhood. I didn't open it, just watched from behind the curtain, phone in hand. Every knock, each ring, made me jump. And I still didn't run. Not this time. I placed another call to Aaron. I told him we needed to complete the trust. There is also a will. I want to protect everything. He agreed. We set everything up under my new name, with several layers of legal protection. If Brandon ever tried to claim a cent, he'd be barred from all courts in the country, despite my best efforts to protect myself with paper and strategy. The emotional blow struck in the quietest of moments. I would sit at night and recollect Brandon as a boy. He laughs. He scraped his knees, the way he would fall asleep on my chest. I'd recall my teenage years, when things got tougher, but I didn't give up on him. The college calls, sudden silences, the increasing distance. How did I miss this? How long had he been fading away as I held on? Perhaps this is the worst form of treachery, the one you see unfold in slow motion, always wishing for something else. But now I know, and I was not going to let him rewrite the ending of my story, because for the first time in my life, I handled a pen. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope. There's no return address. But once I saw the penmanship, I knew. Brandon has always written with strong, slanted strokes. It seemed as if his pen couldn't wait to finish whatever he was working on. Inside was a single sentence. I understand what you did, and this isn't over. I read it twice, 3 times. Then I laughed, not out of fun. But it was precisely the kind of attitude I anticipated from him. No, I miss you. No, where are you? just a warning. Or a threat. I gently folded the letter and slipped it into my bulging evidence folder. I'd been gone nearly 3 weeks. Brandon had initiated what appeared to be a public campaign of concern, begging for knowledge, conducting interviews for local news stations, playing the character of a devastated son looking for his bewildered and defenseless mother. It would have been funny if it hadn't been so scary. And then, as I had dreaded, he made his move. A letter received from the Dayton County Courthouse, official, certified. I signed for it with nervous hands before sitting down at the kitchen table to open it. He had filed a petition to declare me mentally incapable. I could not breathe. The document featured statements from 2 people saying that I had exhibited unpredictable and confusing behavior throughout the previous year. One was a former neighbor. The other is his old college friend. Someone I hardly knew. Brandon's lawyer also submitted audio samples, snippets from past voicemails I left when I was upset, lonely, or just ranting. They made me sound unwell after being chopped and altered, unstable. He also included a letter from a psychiatrist, someone I'd never met before. Claiming concern for my disappearance and obsessive behavior, they asked the court to freeze my accounts, to acquire control of the trust, to drag me back. I felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Aaron arrived that same night. He read everything. His look is unreadable. "We've got work to do," he finally admitted. "But Margaret, stay calm. You must remain sharp." "They are betting on panic." I nodded, too numb to cry. The next several days were like a storm. Aaron engaged an experienced lawyer to assist us with our preparations. We gathered documentation, video calls, money logs, and even a dated notebook to demonstrate that I had been of sound mind every day since I left. We planned an independent psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Levine, a wonderful woman, came to the house and spent 3 hours with me. She inquired about my childhood. My late spouse, Brandon. I told her everything. She took no pity on me. She listened. She asked real questions. And as she went, she grasped my hand and remarked, "You're the most lucid person I've seen this week." It felt like the first breath I had taken in days. Still, the pressure increased. The hearing's details became public. The internet, which had previously sympathized with Brandon's missing mother story, began to turn. Questions arose. Why had I not contacted anyone? Was I unstable? Was someone else pulling the strings? Brandon knows how to keep the media interested in a mystery. But I was no longer terrified, because now I possessed more than simply proof. I had a purpose. In the privacy of my little home, I began working on a video message. I haven't published it yet, but I wanted to be prepared, just in case they silenced me. I addressed the camera and stated, "My name is Margaret Taylor. I'm of sound mind, and I was betrayed by the person I trusted the most." I did not cry. I did not yell. I just told the truth. I knew what was coming, and this time, I wouldn't be the one standing trial. Dayton's courthouse had remained unchanged since the previous time I passed through. Years ago, when I paid a parking ticket and sat in a room with other people attempting to forget their mistakes, back then, I was a wife, a mother, someone who believes in giving others second chances. Now I was the accused. Aaron had told me to look simple, yet strong, something that stated, "I'm not here to beg. I am here to be heard." I wore a navy blue coat with silver buttons, my husband's old watch, and a pair of practical heels that clicked angrily with each step through the courthouse corridors. Brandon was already seated at the front of the courtroom when I entered. He stood as I entered, like a flawless performance. He wore a worried expression on his face. He even smiled. Strangers could take this as warmth. But I recognized it for what it was. He was coming to bury me. The judge, an elderly man with worn eyes, presented the case. In the case of Margaret Taylor's mental capacity, the words hung in the air like smoke. Brandon's attorney spoke first. a tall man with a polished voice and excessive confidence. He planned it out like a script. Margaret had gone missing. Margaret was acting crazily. Margaret was perhaps being deceived. Margaret was a danger to both herself and her pocketbook. He read the psychiatrist's letter, one from a doctor I'd never met, and showed those audio samples of me, chopped and spliced like a horror film. I heard myself sound disoriented, desperate, and even unstable, entirely out of place. I noticed the judge's eyebrows raise, my hands gripped around the armrests. Then Brandon said, "Your Honor," he continued, his voice wavering just slightly. "I adore my mama. I really do. This is the most difficult thing I've ever done, but I believe she's being taken advantage of. She isn't herself. She is lost." That was when I stood. "My turn, Your Honor." The judge nodded. I walked slowly to the stand, pausing only long enough to let the weight of my presence settle. Then I spoke. "My name is Margaret Taylor. I'm 62 years old. I am not mentally impaired. I'm not lost, and I'm not anyone's victim." I opened my folder methodically and carefully, handing the judge a signed, dated, and certified copy of Dr. Levine's full psychiatric report. The verdict: completely sound mind, no signs of cognitive decline, emotional stability. I saw the attorney's shoulders tense. Brandon's face twitched. Then I continued. "I have here," I said, lifting a second folder, a log of every phone call I made in the week before I left, receipts for the transfer of funds to a legal trust, medical records, clean clothes, and a signed affidavit from the attorney who assisted me in leaving the facility, stating that I was lucid, logical, and in complete control of my actions. I halted. "I also have something else, but I'm not going to present it today unless absolutely necessary. I didn't show the file containing every fraudulent signature, stolen loan, and manipulated tax document Brandon had ever touched. That was my ace. Instead, I turned to the judge. He put me in a facility without my consent, took my phone, took my freedom. And now he wants to take what little I have left: my voice, my independence, my dignity. Don't let him." The courtroom was still. Aaron sat beside me, silent but steady. His eyes met mine, proud, but not surprised. The judge leaned back, thumb tapping the file. "I need time to review all documents and the medical evaluation. The court will reconvene in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Brandon turned toward me as the session ended. He tried to catch my eye, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. He left the courtroom with clenched fists and a jaw set tight. His mask was cracking, and I walked out with my head high. The war wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew I could win it. 2 weeks. That's how long the judge gave us. But Brandon didn't waste a single day. Within hours of leaving the courthouse, he doubled down on his public campaign. The local news ran a new segment. "Missing mother reappears in court. Son fears exploitation." Brandon spoke directly to the camera, eyes moist, voice shaking just enough. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe," he said. "She's been through a lot. She's not thinking clearly, and I'm afraid there are people around her with bad intentions." I watched the broadcast from my living room, arms folded, jaw tight. There were no bad people around me, just me, just Margaret Taylor, the woman who raised him, who sacrificed, who forgave more than any mother should. And he had the audacity to paint me as a puppet. That was the moment I knew. The silent war I had declared in my heart was no longer enough. I needed to act. I called Aaron and asked him to come by. When he arrived, I handed him the sealed envelope with every document I had collected: the bogus loans, the fake signatures, the tax returns Brandon had submitted under my name. "Send it," I said. "Not to the court, to the Department of Justice, anonymously." He opened the packet, flipped over the pages and nodded. "This This will attract their attention. I'm counting on it. But I wasn't done. That night, using one of my new names and a fresh internet account, I made a big donation, $5 million, to a national nonprofit organization that protects elderly folks from financial abuse, no name attached. Just the transfer. Within a week, they had started a campaign with my case as a symbol. They didn't name me, but the timing was too good. People began whispering, sharing, and inquiring. How does one... They say motherhood is unconditional, but even unconditional love has limits when met with betrayal. Margaret's story isn't just a tale of quiet resilience. It's a wake-up call, a reminder that strength doesn't always come with a sword. Sometimes, it's forged in silence, in paperwork, in walking away with your dignity intact. To every woman who's ever been made to feel disposable, to every mother who gave everything and was left with nothing but a folded chair and forced smiles, you are not alone. And you are not powerless. Margaret didn't just escape. She reclaimed. She turned every bruise into armor, every silence into strategy. This wasn't revenge. It was restoration of self, of sanity, of sovereignty. And maybe that's the bravest thing we can do, refuse to disappear. Even when the people we love try to write us out of the story. If you felt seen by this story, share it. Comment where you're watching from. Subscribe for more stories that speak the truths we often bury. Because healing begins when silence ends, and sometimes the quietest voices carry the sharpest justice.